My mother-in-law arranged a dinner at an exclusive restaurant, but when I arrived there was no seat reserved for me. She smirked. Maybe a budget place suits you better. I burst out laughing and asked the owner for a seat, because the owner was. The maitre d' barely gave me a glance before apologizing. I'm sorry, madam, but there's no reservation under your name. I blinked, taken aback. That's impossible. I was invited to dinner with my husband's family. They should all be here. He offered a courteous yet firm smile. I checked again. There's a reservation for 6 under Morgan Sinclair. Before I could respond, a crisp, familiar voice sliced through the murmurs. Oh, Claire! Morgan's tone dripped with amusement. I turned and saw my mother-in-law only a few feet away, clad in her signature designer outfit with her platinum blonde hair impeccably styled. Behind her sat my husband, Adam, stiff and silent, while his sisters, Charlotte and Emma, exchanged knowing smirks. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach, but I refused to show it. I don't understand, I replied calmly. Morgan's smile widened. Oh, sweetheart, I didn't think you'd actually show up. She chuckled as if my presence were a punchline. This is a family dinner. A venue like this is well a bit out of your league. Perhaps a modest eatery suits you better. Charlotte snickered over her wine glass while Emma averted her eyes, and Adam continued to clutch his fork in silence. I had known all along that Morgan had made it clear I never measured up. My background wasn't one of old money, I hadn't attended elite schools, and I wasn't born into privilege. From the moment Adam and I became engaged, she'd reminded me that I didn't belong. The subtle digs about my tastes, the occasions when I was conveniently left out, and the lavish gifts she reserved for Adam while offering me nothing but cold smiles. But tonight she had escalated everything. She had orchestrated this lavish dinner at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, ensuring I would be left standing at the door like an unwelcome intruder, and she relished every moment of it. Instead of succumbing to humiliation, something inside me shifted. I offered a slow, deliberate smile that caused Morgan's expression to flicker ever so briefly. Without another word, I turned to the maitre d' and said in a smooth, confident tone, "Would you kindly fetch the owner?" Morgan scoffed. "Oh please, do you really believe the owner would come out just because you asked?" Meeting her gaze steadily, I replied, "Yes, because the owner of this restaurant knows me well. In just a few moments, you'll learn a lesson you'll never forget." A trace of doubt crossed her eyes, though her smirk did not waver. The air grew dense with anticipation until a deep, commanding voice interrupted. "Ciele." I looked up to see Daniel Lauren, the owner, approaching. In his early 50s with salt and pepper hair, a tailored suit, and an air of refined assurance, he embodied the very essence of success. Morgan's eyes widened as she noticed how warmly he regarded me, an attention that was entirely unexpected. "Daniel," I greeted with genuine warmth. He smiled. "It's been a while." His gaze flitted momentarily to Morgan, then to Adam and his sisters, before settling back on me. "What brings you here tonight?" he asked as I gestured towards the table where my in-laws sat. Their expressions shifted from amusement to uncertainty. "Apparently, I wasn't on the reservation," I said lightly, adding, "A slight oversight, wouldn't you agree?" Daniel's eyes darkened subtly as he caught the underlying tone. Then his smile softened. "That won't do." Morgan crossed her arms dismissively. "Really, you think this establishment can simply accommodate her? This is a private dining club. You don't just walk in and expect a table." Daniel's face remained impassive as he replied, "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Sinclair. However, Claire is not a walk-in, she's family." In an instant the table fell silent. Charlotte nearly dropped her glass, Emma's eyes flickered between me and Daniel in disbelief, and Adam's grip on his silverware tightened, though he still said nothing. Morgan's disbelief was palpable. "Oh, this is rich. You must be mistaken. Claire is my son's wife and I assure you she has no connections," I interjected smoothly. "Daniel and I share a long history." Morgan's eyes narrowed. I leaned forward just enough for nearby tables to overhear. "Before I married Adam, I worked in fine dining and Daniel was my mentor." A stunned silence enveloped the table. Morgan opened her mouth to protest, but Daniel continued, "Claire isn't merely a former employee. She was one of my first protégés when she graduated culinary school. I taught her everything about hospitality and high-end service. She was among my finest students." Morgan's jaw tightened as reality settled in. Despite her relentless efforts to demean me, I possessed a past that undermined her entire charade. Still, I wasn't finished. I turned to the maitre d', still lingering at his podium. I trust Daniel's word is enough to secure a table? Instantly, the maitre d' straightened. Of course, Miss Claire. I'll have the staff arrange a table right away. Morgan's face flushed a deep red. This is absurd, she hissed under her breath. You expect special treatment just because you used to work for him? Daniel chuckled gently. No, she receives it because she earned it. The maitre d' signaled a waiter, who swiftly began setting a place at a table next to Adam. I mused quietly, oh look, seems there's plenty of room after all. Morgan's fingers balled into fists on the tablecloth. This is preposterous. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. What's truly absurd is that you believed you could humiliate me and get away with it. Morgan's nostrils flared. You're being overly dramatic. I shrugged softly. I'm simply here to enjoy dinner with my family. Isn't that what you always wanted? Before she could retort, Daniel placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I'll have the chef prepare something special for you, Claire. Morgan nearly choked. Something special? Daniel smiled. On the house, of course. Morgan seethed, but there was little she could do. Adam, though still silent, reached for his drink. In his eyes I caught a flicker of relief, or perhaps embarrassment or shame. I couldn't be sure, but I understood that this dinner was only just beginning, and Morgan Sinclair would soon regret underestimating me. A waiter then placed a freshly polished silver plate in front of me, followed by an artfully arranged amuse-bouche, a delicate masterpiece courtesy of Daniel. Morgan's expression hardened into pure, unfiltered rage. I murmured softly as I picked up my fork and sliced through the dish with practiced precision. This looks incredible. I took a bite, savoring not just the taste but the charged silence that enveloped the table. Charlotte and Emma exchanged wary glances, while Adam continued to fixate on his wine glass. Morgan, however, was not one to concede defeat gracefully. She took a measured sip of her wine, then set the glass down with a bit too much force. Well, she said, forcing a tight smile, I suppose it's only natural that someone like you would have connections in hospitality. I raised an eyebrow. Hospitality. With a dismissive wave, Morgan replied, You know, service work, waiting tables, kitchen jobs. Not exactly the professions we're accustomed to in this family. There it was, the unvarnished truth behind her entire scheme. It wasn't solely about excluding me from dinner. It was about publicly reminding me that in her eyes, I was merely a woman who clawed her way up from nothing. I took another sip of wine before answering. You speak as though that's a fault. Morgan's eyes flickered with annoyance, perhaps even a hint of surprise. It must have been quite an adjustment for you marrying into a family like ours, she continued lightly, though her words dripped with condescension. Adam remained mute, his eyes fixed somewhere in the distance. I searched his gaze, realizing that this wasn't just about his mother's cruelty. It was about his silence. I recalled every instance. The wedding when she deliberately omitted my family from the rehearsal dinner, Christmas when she presented me with a cookbook titled Simple Recipes for the Clueless Wife in front of everyone, and last summer's snide remark about how fortunate Adam was to have taken a chance on me. Each time Adam had let it slide, and I had convinced myself that it wasn't worth the conflict. But tonight was different. This was a calculated public humiliation, and Adam had allowed it to happen. Setting my wine glass down with deliberate care, I leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. Morgan, I said in an even tone, do you know the difference between you and me? She tilted her head. Curiosity mingled with disbelief in her eyes. I smiled softly. I built everything I have through hard work. A stunned silence fell over the table. Morgan's face hardened. Excuse me, I didn't quite catch that, she said sharply. You heard me, I reiterated, feeling Charlotte stiffen beside her, and Emma biting her lip to stifle a laugh. Morgan scoffed. Are you implying that I haven't worked for what I have? I let that question hang before continuing. I didn't marry into wealth. I didn't inherit status. I forged my career from the ground up. And yet, here we are, sitting in the same restaurant, sharing the same meal, and receiving equal respect from the owner. Morgan's fingers curled around her napkin until her knuckles turned white. Charlotte and Emma had ceased their furtive glances, and Adam looked as though he wished he could vanish beneath the table, perhaps for the first time since I met Morgan. In that moment I saw a flicker in her eyes, something she usually concealed so well. It wasn't anger, it was fear. Fear that her lifelong campaign to convince herself that I was inferior, that I was nothing more than a gold digger clinging to her son, was unraveling before everyone's eyes. I was not someone she could break. I casually picked up my fork again and cut into my dish. "Oh, and Morgan," I said, exhaling sharply with a touch of triumph, "you should be cautious about whom you look down upon." Spearing a bite of food, I added while chewing slowly, "After all, you never know who might end up above you." The tension at the table was palpable. Morgan, typically composed and authoritative, now sat with a stony expression, her grip on her wine glass so tight I half expected it to shatter. Adam seemed desperate to disappear into his seat, and Charlotte and Emma exchanged uncertain glances, as if wondering whether to step in. Meanwhile, I felt more certain than ever of my place. I saw it in the way Morgan's meticulously maintained facade of superiority cracked, if only for a moment. She wasn't accustomed to being challenged. She had built her power on others yielding to her, on their fear or excessive politeness, but I was no longer afraid. Taking a slow, measured breath, Morgan composed herself and set her glass down with a deliberate click. "I see," she finally said in a deceptively smooth voice. "I suppose I should commend you, Claire. You've managed to rise above your circumstances." I merely sipped my wine again, denying her the satisfaction of a response. "But explain yourself," she purred, her lips curving into a saccharine smile. "If you're so independent and self-made, why is it that my son is the one funding your lifestyle?" I paused. Charlotte let out a soft gasp, Emma shifted uncomfortably, and Adam visibly flinched. Morgan's smile sharpened as I felt every eye at the table fixed on me, waiting for a reaction. I set my glass down with deliberate slowness. "What exactly do you mean?" I asked, feigning perplexity. Leaning forward, Morgan dropped her voice to a mockingly husky whisper. "Darling, it's quite simple. My son is the reason you can maintain that delightful little boutique career. You don't really need to work, you merely pretend to have a vocation." "How charming." She tilted her head, her smug expression returning. "You prattle about self-sufficiency. Yet by the end of the day, you're nothing more than someone my son supports." That was her final card. A barb intended to reduce me to insignificance. I let her words settle as I noted Adam's continued refusal to meet my eyes while his sisters held their breath, expecting me to crumble. Then, to everyone's surprise, I laughed. A full, genuine laugh, not a mere embarrassed chuckle. Morgan's smirk faltered. "Is something amusing?" she demanded. I replaced my napkin on the table, still chuckling. "I've just realized how completely out of touch you are, Morgan." Narrowing her eyes, she snapped, "Excuse me." I gestured toward Adam, my tone calm and measured. "You believe he's on my side, don't you?" I asked, arching a brow. "That's adorable," Morgan replied with a sneer. Charlotte choked audibly. Emma's lips parted in shock, and Adam turned ashen. Morgan's smile evaporated. "What exactly are you saying?" I sighed, almost pitying her. "You still see Adam as your little boy, the one in charge, the provider, the man who rescued me from a wretched existence. But let me be clear, Morgan, that isn't how a marriage functions." Morgan stiffened. "You want to know what's truly ironic?" I continued, my tone businesslike. "Half of his investment projects were fueled by my money." A stunned silence fell over the table as Morgan's eyes widened, her world shifting in real time. She mumbled something indistinctly, and I smiled, this time without warmth. "Adam didn't build his career alone," I stated, still addressing her while keeping my gaze locked on my husband. "When he sought to invest, he lacked the capital." I picked up my wine glass once more. Morgan's fingers twitched. "That's impossible," she insisted. I merely shrugged. "Believe what you will, but the truth is, his success is built on my investments, my strategies, and my unwavering support." Charlotte and Emma glanced at Adam for confirmation, yet he remained silent, frozen in place. I shook my head. "You think you can belittle me by labeling me a dependent housewife? That's laughable. In reality, Morgan, Adam needs me far more than I need him." Her face flushed a deep red. I leaned back, arms crossed. You spent years making me feel I didn't belong, yet I was the one keeping this marriage, and by extension your esteemed family name afloat. Emma looked as if she might faint, Charlotte was utterly speechless, and finally Adam spoke. Ciela, maybe we should. I raised a hand to cut him off. No, Adam, I said firmly. You have no right to suggest that, not after sitting silently while your mother tried to humiliate me. Morgan's eyes shifted to him as she realized, for the first time, that her so-called golden boy was completely spineless. In that moment she regarded him as insignificant, as if he were beneath her expectations, as though he had utterly failed her. A delicious reversal indeed. I stood smoothing my dress. I believe I'm finished here. Morgan's nostrils flared. You can't just... I turned to Daniel, who had been watching from a respectful distance. Daniel, it was lovely seeing you. Thank you for the hospitality. Daniel nodded, amused. Always a pleasure, Claire. Then I looked at Adam. Are you coming? He hesitated, first staring at me, then at his mother. In that moment I knew exactly what he intended to do. Adam had never truly chosen me before, and he wasn't about to start now. Morgan's triumphant smile faltered as I returned a knowing smile. What she didn't realize was that I had already made my choice too. Soon she would regret ever trying to put me in my place, for I was about to show both her and Adam just how powerful I could be. Adam didn't follow me. I hadn't expected him to. A moment of reckoning stepping outside, the cool night air caressed my skin, though I hardly felt its chill. My mind was razor-sharp, clear as day. That dinner had served as a long overdue wake-up call. A moment of truth years in the making. Now it was time to act. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady as I typed. Let's move forward. Initiate the process first thing tomorrow. Within seconds a response appeared. Attorney. Understood. The first draft of the divorce settlement will be ready by noon. I exhaled slowly, staring at the screen. The word divorce didn't scare me. What frightened me was how long I had denied the truth, that Adam had never really been on my side, that I had been isolated in my own marriage for years. But no more. Tonight had provided the final push, and Morgan remained blissfully unaware of how completely I was about to upend the life she had fought so hard to control. Gathering evidence, I arrived home ahead of Adam, granting me just enough time to do what needed to be done. I headed straight for the home office, the very space Adam used for his investments, and opened the safe. His passcode, one he had never bothered to change, proved to be his downfall. Inside lay all the financial documents. Bank statements, investment portfolios, business agreements, and the one document that most interested me, the contract linking his most profitable venture to my initial funding. I took it out and scanned its familiar legal jargon. This document was the financial backbone of his entire empire. While Morgan fancied her son as the family's entrepreneurial genius, without me he was nothing. I quickly snapped a photo of the contract and returned it to its exact place. There was no need to remove it when I already possessed what I required. The final confrontation next, I moved to the bedroom, retrieved a suitcase and began packing, not in anger nor in haste but with absolute clarity. This wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a calculated departure. By the time Adam walked through the front door, I was seated on the couch, suitcase at my side, waiting. He paused in the doorway, staring at me as if unsure whether he'd entered the correct home. I tilted my head, silently noting his tardiness. His eyes flickered to the suitcase and his breath caught. "What are you doing?" he finally managed. I rose calmly, leaving him momentarily speechless. "You made your choice, Adam," I said smoothly. "Back at the restaurant, when your mother humiliated me and you sat there silently." His jaw tensed. "I was trying to keep the peace," I continued. "But your mother orchestrated that dinner to disgrace me. She deliberately left me off the reservation, insulted me, and tried to make me feel unwanted." I stepped closer, watching him visibly shrink under my unwavering gaze. "And you let it happen just like you always do." He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly flustered. "It's complicated, Claire. You know how she is." I exhaled sharply. "No, Adam, it's simple, you're weak." His eyes met mine, wide with offense, yet the truth remained undeniable. "You've allowed your mother to dictate our entire marriage," I declared. I had been patient with him, granting chance after chance, But tonight revealed his true nature. Adam swallowed hard, attempting to protest. Can we just talk about this? I sighed. That's the problem, Adam. There's nothing left to discuss. I picked up my suitcase and brushed past him toward the door. Just then he said, I'll fight you on this. I turned and his face darkened as I continued. If you think you can walk away from this marriage with half of everything, you're mistaken. I paused briefly, then added softly, Oh, Adam, you really should read your own contracts more carefully. Confusion flickered across his face. You wouldn't even have half of what you claim if it weren't for me, I asserted. You built your investments using my money, and now I have all the paperwork to prove it. His face drained of color. I stepped even closer, lowering my voice. I let you borrow my money, Adam. I allowed you to build something with it, but now I want it all back. Adam staggered back, the full weight of reality crashing over him. He had assumed he could intimidate me, unaware of who he was truly dealing with. Frozen in the doorway, his face turned ashen and his jaw clenched. He realized that I wasn't merely leaving. I was reclaiming everything he thought he controlled. He began to speak, perhaps to argue or plead as he had so many times before, but I offered no chance. I'll be staying at the penthouse, I declared, adjusting the strap of my bag over my shoulder. His brows furrowed. What penthouse? He stammered. I smiled slightly. Oh, Adam, the one you think is yours. I watched as his confusion transformed into horror. The downtown penthouse? He asked, voice unsteady. The very one I purchased under my name. Yes, I replied coolly. My lawyer reviewed the ownership documents earlier today. It was never yours, Adam. His nostrils flared. You wouldn't dare, he exclaimed. I already did, I countered, reaching into my bag and producing an envelope, which I tossed onto the counter. He hesitated before opening it, his eyes scanning the legal text as his hands trembled. He swallowed hard while reading. You own 51% of my investment firm. I nodded. Correct. His breathing turned shallow. That's impossible, he muttered. I simply shrugged. Not really, I was the initial investor. I never transferred ownership to you. You assumed I did because frankly, you never bothered to read the contracts. I watched as panic overtook his features, his mind undoubtedly reeling at how he had let this happen. CLA, he said, voice tight. You can't just take this from me. I smiled. I'm not taking anything. I already own it. He staggered back, gripping the counter. This was the man who had allowed his mother to humiliate me, who had sat in cowardly silence while she stripped away my dignity. Now he was the one rendered powerless. I don't understand, he muttered. Why are you doing this? And for the first time in years I felt utterly unmistakably free. Because Adam, I replied. I finally recognized my own worth. With that I turned and walked out of the house for the last time. A new beginning. A month later, I sat in the penthouse with my legs crossed and a glass of champagne in hand. Across from me my attorney smiled as she slid the finalized divorce papers toward me. It's official, you're free, she announced. I exhaled slowly, running my fingers over the thick document. Free. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. The legal battle was short and brutal. Adam had tried to resist, storming into meetings, demanding better terms, even threatening court. But the moment my lawyers presented the documents proving I was the true majority shareholder in his firm, his arrogance crumbled. Morgan had attempted to intervene, calling me furiously and accusing me of being a gold-digging snake. I simply replied, if you had raised him any better this wouldn't have happened, and promptly blocked her number. Morgan Sinclair was no longer my problem. I raised the champagne glass to my lips, savoring the moment. Then, as if fate had one last twist in store, my phone buzzed. A message from Adam. Can we talk? I smirked, set the glass down and typed back. About what? Then came his reply. I don't know what to do. I exhaled and shook my head. It was tragic, really. For years I had waited for Adam to become the man I believed I married. For him to stand up to his mother and fight for me as I had fought for him. But now I saw him exactly as he was. A man who had spent his life hiding behind the strength of others, too feeble to create something on his own. The irony was that he needed me now more than ever, yet I no longer needed him at all. I sent one final message. That's not my problem anymore. and then blocked his number. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, and that was the most empowering decision I had ever made.